for joining. Just to introduce you to myself, I'm Layla Scola. I'm currently a senior at SCU and I will be the moderator for today. So just a couple of housekeeping things first. If you wouldn't mind just keeping your microphone off. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to throw it in the chat room as we go along. We will be answering questions primarily at the end of the event, but please feel free to ask as we go. We'll begin this event with just a few introductions, then go into the panel portion, and then close with a Q&A from the audience. And as mentioned, please feel free to ask any questions as we go through. So first, Dean Scott, would you like to start?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Elaine Scott, Dean of the School of Engineering at Santa Clara University. I'm so pleased to welcome Santa Clara students and alums to this event, Engineering Connections. This is the first in a series of speaker events where we will bring in students and alums from the School of Engineering to share their experiences and insights on a number of topics that are important to you. Within the School of Engineering, we are committed to our core values known as I CARE: integrity, collaboration, aspiration, respect, and exploration. And we use these core values to form our academic programs and our research, aligning with our Jesuit mission. We also use these values to formulate priorities for the school. One of these priorities focuses on fostering an inclusive culture, one that promotes and empowers the diversity of our faculty, staff, and students, creating an equitable environment where all students, faculty, and staff are heard, valued, and respected. To accomplish this past year, we created a working group within the School of Engineering Advisory Board to address diversity, equity, inclusion issues in engineering. This working group is comprised of faculty, alums, and staff, and the working group's work is focused on issues related to women and other underrepresented groups in engineering from before they enter college to after they graduate and enter the workforce. These issues are extremely important for our students, our campus, and the nation overall. This event tonight, Engineering Connections, is a result of the working group's efforts led by Linda Kaufman. I would like to thank Linda, the working group, and our staff for all the work that has gone into putting this event to build connections together. By connecting with one another, we will build a stronger, more inclusive engineering community. The event tonight is virtual, but we are looking forward to future events where we can host them in person in our new Sobrato campus for discovery and innovation for an even stronger opportunity to connect with one another. I hope that you will be able to join us then. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have a panel of distinguished guest speakers, and I thank each of them for their time and for their experiences that they will share. I will now hand it back to Layla Scola so that she can begin our session. Layla, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dean Scott. So again, I'm Layla Scola. I'm currently a senior at Santa Clara University studying computer science and engineering. I'm from Los Gatos, California, which is just about 10 minutes south of campus. I'm heavily involved in the Society of Women Engineers, as well as a few other organizations on campus. Next, we're going to go into the introductions of our panelists. And once again, just to reiterate, please feel free to throw any questions you have in the chat as we go along, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. So now to introduce our panelists, I will read the panelist's name aloud, and then you can just take a minute or so to introduce yourself. So first, Marcy Alstott.
Hello, everybody. Marcy Alstott, and I've been involved with the Engineering Advisory Board for over 7 years, just recently rolled off. And so love Santa Clara. I went to Santa Clara for my MBA. My undergraduate and master's degree are in engineering, but not from Santa Clara. And I've been in high-tech manufacturing and operations for my career. Always involved with new product introductions, always involved with innovation. And so those decades have been with large companies and small companies in Silicon Valley and some period of time on the other side of the country on the East Coast. I have been consulting for the last 5 years with startup companies, and that's been a real joy. So working with entrepreneurs and helping them take their great ideas from small concept to volume. I'm passionate about diversity and inclusion in engineering, and for that reason, I mentor a lot, either with the people I'm working with or with folks I've worked with in the past. I think being involved with the network that I've created over the years has been one of the biggest joys in my career. So back to you, Leila.
Thank you so much. Up next, we have Kathy Chou.
Hello, Kathy Chou here. I am so excited to be on this panel. And I am a Santa Clara parent twice over. So that is my connection. I have a mechanical engineering degree and a master's from Stanford and an MBA. And I currently work at VMware, and I run the sales strategy and operations team there. I have over 1,200 employees from all over the world. And I've also had a very interesting career. I've done technical work, but I've also done sales work. So it's interesting how an engineering background can actually set you up to do lots of different other functions, because it's really more the way you think. And so I've been fortunate to be able to do that. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are also it's really critically important right now. I've been on what we call the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council at VMware. So I've represented VMware here. I'm very passionate about seeing diversity in engineering and seeing what we can do to further this along. And so I'm really, really excited to be a part of this panel today and hopefully share a little bit of my story around networking and how important it is. Back over to you, Leila.
Thank you so much. Next, Mariah Manzano.
Hello, my name is Mariah Manzano. I graduated from SCU in 2020. I studied web design and engineering and then minored in technical innovation and entrepreneurship, which is also through the School of Engineering. I was pretty involved on campus, but especially with the Society of Women Engineers, or SWE, where I served on board throughout college and then served as president my senior year. I also co-started the Ideas Coalition within the School of Engineering, which stands for Inclusion and Diversity in Engineering and STEM. It's made up of student org leaders looking to create a sense of belonging for every student on campus. And nowadays, I am a software engineer at Cisco. I am also the CEO and co-founder of Opal, which is a mentorship hosting platform that's geared toward finding mentors for college students who are underrepresented in their fields. I co-founded this while at SCU, actually, with a few friends. Very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And then last up, we have Waguih Ishak.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invite, and delighted to be with this panel of distinguished people. I am not a graduate of Santa Clara, but I have several members of my family who are associated with Santa Clara. My wife received her master's in engineering management from Santa Clara University. My son teaches at Santa Clara, and my grandson went to Kids on Campus. So he's very proud of that on the Santa Clara campus. I worked for 4 companies, for Hewlett-Packard, Agilent, Avago, which is now Broadcom, and Corning. And actually, all of them were in R&D, research and development. And today, I'm a full-time vice president and chief technologist at Corning here in Silicon Valley. And at the same time, I am also an adjunct professor at Stanford, all in electrical engineering and applied physics. And being in the research lab, networking, and linking and connecting with other people are so fundamental. I couldn't have done it without that. So I teach the network class at Corning, and that's what I will be using today to answer some of the questions that people will ask. And again, it's really pleasure to be on that panel. Leila?
Thank you so much. Thank you to all our panelists for that introduction. So nice to meet you all. So now we'll get into the main portion of this event, which is the panel questions. Just to remind everyone, the main theme of this event is the importance of networking and building your personal support system. So we're going to talk about questions related to that. Before we dive into the questions, though, I do want to throw a poll question out to everyone. The question is going to be, what is your engineering connection? So everyone will give you just a minute or two to vote on this, and then we'll talk more. All right. So thank you everyone for filling that out. You can see that the largest proportion of us is faculty and staff, which kind of makes sense because of who is here and speaking. But also a significant portion of us are current undergraduate students. So all of us are obviously affiliated with SCU, but no matter where you fall, we can all use connections and building new ones. And because we're spread across the board, connecting with someone who's not necessarily like in your engineering connection can definitely widen your network and open new opportunities. So let's go ahead and dive in. Panelists, you don't have to answer every question or any question if you don't have an answer for it. There is going to be directed questions as we go along, so take your time to answer. First question is, how has your network helped you progress in either your career as a diverse employee or in other aspects of your professional or student experience, for example, during your first job search? Mariah, would you mind taking this to begin with?
I do not mind. Thanks, Layla. I will just start by saying both my network and support system have helped me tremendously. I say those separately actually because I do think they're kind of like squares and rectangles where everyone in your support system is part of your network, but not everyone in your network is part of your support system. I think especially now as people expand their network digitally, which I fully support, I think is great, the excitement about adding someone to your network might be diluted a little bit since it's so common, it's so easy, it's a click of a button in some cases. But I'll focus this response on what I consider my close network. So when I think of my network, I of course think of the people I'm connected to, some closer than others, but a network can be quite broad. And the nature of building a network can sometimes feel very transactional. So I've made a point to focus my conversations on a very human level when I meet someone new. So I ask them about their day or their life, find shared interests immediately. This is something I really try to do. And just have a conversation for the sake of chatting with another human instead of the sake of asking them for something. So I believe that because of that approach, people are not only open to extending a hand out to me when I need it, but they also reach out when they see a job role, company, project, or even a person that they think aligns with who I am or my interests. With the exception of my first on-campus job, my freshman year, all other job opportunities I've had since were through opportunities presented to me by someone in my network. For example, I hosted an event through SCUE, met a Cisco employee there, connected on LinkedIn, continued to just build my brand and identity. And she ultimately reached out to me with a referral link because she thought I'd be a good fit for the team that I'm currently on right now. So my network did help me get that first job out of college. And I briefly just want to touch on the support system too. When I think of a support system, I think of deeper relationships. They are the people I can comfortably go to when I'm doubting myself, or even people who advocate for me when I'm not in the room, which I don't necessarily know who those people are, but they're part of my support system. And that's not my entire network. That's a segment of my network. So because I'm human, I doubt myself occasionally. So having a support system to chat things out with has been extremely helpful to me. SWE, my friends, my family, they're huge support systems to me in college and even today. In a particular instance, I just want to reflect on for a second is when I almost canceled my interview with Cisco. I'm a fairly confident person, but I have these thoughts sometimes. I thought that they must have made a mistake. And if they hired me, they regret it. My title right now is software engineer, and I was interested in an interdisciplinary role. So I was convinced there was a better fit for me somewhere on this earth. And my mom, who of course is part of my support system, she didn't waste any time reassuring me of who I was or my skills or why I was capable of the job. She just asked me, what is the worst that could happen? And she was right. I think that's the beauty of a support person. They'll push you to just try because they believe you'll either succeed or you're strong enough to fail and learn from it. So I finished the interview, got the job, it's where I am today. And I wanted to highlight that point in particular because sometimes we just need that nudge from someone in our support system, and it could change your life, honestly. So long answer, but overall, my network has played a huge role in my career development.
Thank you so much, Mariah. That was very insightful. Do any of the other panelists have anything they'd like to add to this?
So I'll make a point. I think a network is something that you have to invest in. And I think that's, maybe made obvious by what Mariah is talking about there. It's more than clicking a button on LinkedIn and accepting a connection. It does take work over time and over the years. And I think well worth the investment. And I think what that ends up meaning is that you do respond to others as they request help, and you invest in others. And as you're building that those connections and that trust with that group, you're building value for the future. And I can say personally that's been true for me.
Yeah, I agree with what Marcy said. And by the way, Mariah, I love your story. I wish I had your confidence when I was your age. But I really feel that it does take investment. And I have a little trick about, when you are investing in this relationship, it is not transactional. I love that term, that it's not transactional, but that you develop almost in a way a contract with your mentor, because it's two-way. They can get something out of this relationship as well. So when you look at that and you have that conversation, it's really getting that spark and that ability to make that human connection. And when you do that, it's amazing that you can create these relationships that will last a lifetime. Not many, okay, so it's not about quantity in my book, it's about quality. And as you learn more and more about your mentor and they learn more and more about you, we'll talk about this later, but they become your advocate. And I know that's another question, so I'll stop there.
Actually, I'll add one more thing, that networking helped me not on my first job, but I was so fortunate. My first 3 jobs for 30 years gave me the chance to go around the world and not losing one business card. And I formed a really very healthy network, because we all know that we are moving now to internet speed and everything happens out of relationships. And you cannot do it alone. Relationships, diversity, and coming together. But I remember after 30 years of being in Silicon Valley in 2007, when I decided to work for a company that's not in Silicon Valley, the headquarters is in New York. My manager is 3,000 miles away, which is great. You don't want your manager just looking over you. But after I joined, a week later, there was an article in the business news. They interviewed him and said, "Why did you hire this guy?" He said, "Well, I hired him because I looked at his BlackBerry at that time, and he has 6,000 contacts. So I'll give him 3 to 5 years to help us in Silicon Valley." And I didn't know that I have 6,000, but somehow maybe I showed it to him. But that really helped me. And I thought that after I read the article, he will fire me after 5 years if I don't get results. So I'm approaching 15 years. So the network must have helped.
Hey, that's pretty cool, Waguih, that you had 6,000 contacts. Yes. And that there was an article written about your boss, about you.
It was. I didn't know that they interviewed him, and he was talking about this is the reason why he hired me. So I talked to him later and he said, "How about the technical competence and teamwork and all of this?" He said, "Well, it's a network."
Thank you everyone for those responses. Obviously a lot of good information to take away from there. Next question is, what have you found most challenging about building your own network, and how did you overcome those challenges? Kathy, would you mind starting us off?
Yes, as I alluded to earlier, I was a very shy person. And I'll tell you, I was thinking about this. It started when I had to sell Girl Scout cookies door to door. And I got a lot of rejection back then, a lot of no, and it really made me go into my shell. So I'm not a person that really I didn't want to bother people. You know, I was afraid that people would turn me down or reject me if I went and asked them for something. And it was something that by the way, Waguih and I share a lot of the same company. So I worked at HP and Agilent as well. And when I was at HP, I was part of this accelerated development program where I was assigned a mentor. And he happened to be the person who was running the server division at that time. And it wasn't really until then, it was forced, you know, so I learned more about him. And as I spent more time with him, again, it was set up, but I realized that I could ask him these questions and I started to get confidence. You know, I would ask him, what is your day like? How are things? And we built that connection, you know, that I talked about earlier, building that relationship, that spark helped. And he was my mentor for 2 years while I was there. He then subsequently left HP. We stayed in touch. I left HP and we still stayed in touch. And we had a relationship for about 15 years until he fully retired. But it's something that will stay with me. And what I learned was that you have to have that confidence. You have to have that ability to ask. I know it is difficult to do it. So what I've done is, you know, now it's a little hard in the pandemic, but we used to have these networking events, and I'm sure we can do these sorts of things virtually as well. So I always put this down, you know, especially if I don't have, it could be a networking event. It could be someone that you know at school. It could be a family friend, whoever it is. But the goal, especially if you don't know the person and you're at these sorts of things, is to make that one connection, get the contact information, and do at least one follow-up, just one. Start small, right? Because it's quality over quantity. Some of those things won't pan out, but the ones that do will pay dividends. And so if I can say more than anything is having the confidence to be bold, to go and ask, be prepared, by the way, when you approach someone as to why that contract that I talked about. But when you start it and you do it the first time, you'll realize it's like riding a bicycle. And as you do it more and more, you'll become comfortable. So that was my story.
Thank you. I had a mentor who kind of instilled the same confidence in me. He told me that the answer is always going to be no until you ask. And then even then, you can probably convince someone to say yes to you. So I agree. And he told me that anytime I go to an event, make sure I walk out with a new contact that I feel comfortable emailing or texting afterwards. And yeah, like you said, once you start, it's hard to stop because you realize that everyone else wants to connect too.
Mm-hmm.
Do any of the other panelists have anything else to add to that? Thank you so much, Kathy.
It's a great story, Kathy. I totally agree with you. Take it from one like me. I'm 71 years old now and thinking about retirement. And I remember one time I read that eventually your network is your net worth. When you finish with your jobs, we are talking to undergraduate students now, so they are very young, but believe me, later you will find that your network is the thing that you will be proud of in the future. So while you have it, turn those contacts into extraordinary opportunities for you, your family, and your company, and try to be a connector. You'll start building your network first, but then pay some of that back by being a connector and bringing people together. But I found the most challenging thing to keep a healthy network is that people do not refresh their network. You keep the information and then people move around. The average lifetime in companies now is not 13 years anymore. It's just every 2 years people change jobs. So you have to keep the network refreshed. And as Kathy mentioned, definitely quality over quantity. It's good to have both of them, but keep nudging people and find out about their new contacts and their new phones or new addresses. You will need it and it will help in the future.
Yes, I love all these points. I do want to add one thing. Kathy mentioned like being shy growing up. I wasn't a Girl Scout, but still very shy. I don't know what did it to me. But in addition to being authentic, and confident, I will say what has helped me a lot is being realistic. I used to put people on a pedestal that I didn't know. And it helped me a lot to remember that they are human, which sounds silly, but sometimes I forget about people I idolize in some way. Remember that they're human, and at one point they were also at square one or wherever I am. And for that reason, people are often open to mentoring because they're like, I was there, I can help you. So in addition to confidence, just be realistic and remember it's a human to human interaction.
Thank
And
you
I'll
so
add
much.
one other thought, and that's I think as a woman, it's even more important if it's not already very important. I think especially if you're in an environment where there are mostly men, and you can apply this if you're a person of color and you're in an environment where there are more people who are not like you. I think it's important to connect with people not like you, and it isn't necessarily, unfortunately, because we're human, it's not necessarily natural for the guys to invite the girl out to out after work. I mean, that's been true for most of my career. But if you establish a relationship, and you don't have to be one of the guys, but if you're a human that they appreciate, you're often included, and those relationships can help you go as you go forward in time. So you have to take, I think, you have to have a little bit more enthusiasm about creating those connections if you aren't necessarily the majority in a company or in a business unit.
Thank you all for your insights again. Definitely sounds like, we're all human. We have these shared experiences. And if you reach out, people are willing to do what they can. So moving on to the next question. How have mentors and or advocates helped you as part of your network? Maybe talk even a little bit about the difference between a mentor and an advocate. Marcy, would you mind starting us off?
Sure, yeah. And I thought a little bit about this question. I think there are a lot of different words we use for similar things, but they are a little bit different. Mentors, advocates, coaches, support team. I think it is important to kind of understand the differences. I think, as Kathy already described, an advocate is probably someone who evolves out of a mentor relationship. An advocate is someone who might not meet with you regularly and give you advice about what you're doing, but is there in your pocket if you need them. And a mentor might be someone who you have a more formal relationship with, although that isn't always the case. It depends on the company and the situation you're in. I know in my career, I don't think it was that common, and I started at HP too, so there's a theme going on here. And when I started at HP, there wasn't a formal mentoring program per se, but I had mentors. And those people were the folks who I could sit down and talk with, who weren't necessarily in my chain of command. They were people who I trusted and who had good advice. I knew it, and I took advantage of that, and established, a connection. And we would go out for lunch, or we'd have coffee. When I had a job opportunity come up, I would go run that by that person. When I started I started thinking about that. I can probably think of a dozen people in the first sort of decade of my career who I would consider mentors, who I frankly still am connected with and talk with. There's also a concept called a coach. A coach is something maybe a little bit more formal, and some companies have that open to you, and that may be a little bit more formal and directed. So if you're looking for a way of improving something in your style, or in the way you're working with your peers, or you're looking for a way of building on your strengths, a coach can be a good way to help you move forward. And oftentimes that's involving tools, 360 kind of evaluation, of your skills, talking to the people who work for you, who work with you, and who you work for. And that's a very valuable relationship as well. And then as Kathy talked about, the advocates in your life are going to be important. I think they're the ones who know you and understand your skills, and who can put in a good word, and that becomes more and more important as you move up in an organization. So there's a lot of different roles. They sometimes sort of Venn diagram, there's some overlap in there, but they're all important and important to nurture.
Thank you. Thank you so much for making that distinction for us, Marcy. If any of the panelists have like a quick add-on, feel free. Okay, then we'll go ahead to the last question we have prepared. What advice would you give to a student or a newly graduated alumni who are in the early stages of building their network? Waguih, would you mind starting us off?
Okay, can I give more than one advice?
Please.
I'm going now to borrow from the class I teach, because I learned this the hard way. I think for people who are just starting their career, I always advise our new hires, start building a list of who is who in your company. Start with your company, with your organization. Find out who to go to, just to answer a technical question and find out about a certain technology, how the company works. So this is really number one. Number two, I remember when I joined HP in 1977, my hiring manager gave me 3 advices. One of them relates to that. He said, this building here, it was in Palo Alto on Deer Creek Road. We have about 600 engineers. If you want to talk to anyone, don't use a phone. Walk and go to their offices. As you walk, you will meet other people and build a network. And at that time, network to me was more like electronic network. So I didn't understand what you're saying, but later I realized that this guy is really very smart. Number 3, don't eat lunch alone. Just go to a table. Barring the pandemic, hopefully we'll get back to work, and just go and mingle with people. And then number 4, which is extremely important, do not lose a business card. It's funny that, and interesting that the business card technology stayed with us. It never went away. We tried to do it electronically. As a community, we failed. We still use a paper business card. And don't get a scanner and scan all your business cards. I will never forget the time when I was flying from San Francisco to Munich on a 747, and the guy in front of me was asleep. He was snoring, but there was a machine that he was carrying to zzz, zzz. So I looked over, and in his sleep, he has a stack of cards. He was putting the cards into a machine. And I waited until he woke up and said, "What is this?" He said, "This is a card scanner." I went and bought one, and that's how I made the 6,000 contacts. It's really very important. Of course, you have to be a person of interest so people are very busy these days. People don't have a lot of attention span. So when you start building your network, you need to be known for something. So when you go there, they will just listen to you. And so you need to be concise and tell them who you are. And I always try to connect with people who know more than I do. And I was correct 100% of the time. They're always better. You go and just ask them. And as I said before, keep refreshing your network all the time. And send notes to those people and tell them, "Hi, how are you doing? This is me." So those are some of the advice. Especially don't lose the business cards, and don't eat lunch alone. I think it's a good way to get the bulk of your network.
A lot of good advice in there. Thank you. I'm glad you gave us more than one tip. Does anyone else have anything to add on?
I'm actually going to just add on to something that actually Waguih said earlier, which is be persistent and don't be afraid to ask as you're getting that network, right? Because especially, I know myself, I'm also mid to late career. And when a new student or newly graduated person approaches me, I will actually take those calls because I know how important it is. And you'll, like you also said, Layla, you never know. You just ask, right? We are human, as Mariah said, you know, and as Marcy said, people want to coach. You know, we're right now in the pandemic, we're actually aching to have those types of connections. Just don't be afraid to ask. You know, do not be the Girl Scout cookie self that I was. And after I got rejected, I just closed up. You'd be surprised at how many people will take that call. And that will be that first business card that you get that you can scan on your path to 6,000.
And as Mariah's mom said, what's the worst that could happen? Right?
That's right.
Great advice. Thank you so much. Thank you, panelists, for answering all the questions today that we had prepared ahead of time. Wonderful insights. I hope everyone learned a little bit more about networking. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, raise your hand, or at this point, you may come off mute and ask them directly to the panelists. If no one has anything, we have a couple that have filtered in already. So I will just start by reading this first one off. So if anyone has another question, just throw it into the chat. How did you, and I think you answered this as we've gone along, but initially build your network in those first moments of entering an industry or academia where you didn't know anyone, starting a clean slate? What was the first thing you made sure to do?
I will answer that because, as I said, and that advice resonated with me after a while. I kept writing the names of people and what they are doing, and it's almost like making their business card myself. So I would say the first thing you do when you graduate, you will be very immersed in your first job. So your company, like in the first couple of years, you need to establish your credibility. So don't start going outside and build the network outside. Build your inter-company network. And then as your project progressed and you want to deal with the customers and deal with other companies and collaborators, bring that into your network. So I strongly advise start with your company because that's easier and it's definitely needed in your first job.
Can I add one thing, Layla?
Please.
I'll just say when I started Cisco, my first question was, who are my stakeholders here? Like, who's counting on me to succeed? And so immediately within the first few weeks, met with everyone on my team, like a one-on-one, very human conversation. In the end, me saying, what do you do at Cisco again? Like understanding their job role, but connecting with them on a human level first. So I definitely agree with connecting with people in your company. But I also asked not only who are my stakeholders right now, but where do I see myself within this company later on, and who fills that role right now. And I think that's a good step, whether you're in a company or you're a student, like what role do you see yourself in, and go from there. And I think when it's like that's something that you see yourself doing, then your intentions seem very clear, and there's a reason why you're reaching out to that person. Because if there's no reason, it's kind of obvious from my experiences.
Yeah, I think Mariah and Waguih did a great job of explaining what to do when you're first starting out in a company, right? Just, I do agree, focus internally, make the human connections. I'm gonna provide a point of view a little bit later, because people project, right? Okay, so let's say you've been in the company for a while. Let's say, you've been out for 10 years. Okay, now that might seem like an eternity from now, but trust me, it happens like that. One thing that I learned, and I wished someone had told me when I was younger, was this notion of a life mentor. It's, Marcy, probably like your coach idea, but it's not really within your company, and it's not really focused completely on the business, but it's around life. Like, for instance, I was a mom and a working mom, and was I doing the right thing? Should I have gone part-time? Should I not have? Do I volunteer at the kids' school or not? And how do I marry that with what I'm doing, at work? And I did. I had found a life mentor, sort of life coach, someone that I could actually speak to, not in the company, who could really help me, because I would have business crises and issues that they could address. And then I had family crises and issues. Her name was Jean Koblenz, by the way, that she could address. But sometimes, you can broaden your definition of what a mentor is. As Marcy said, there's many different definitions, but I just wished I had known, because I struggled a little bit early career, because I really found her a little bit later. So I'm just going to add that. It's just something to think about for later. And by the way, if you happen to find someone early, and that's someone that you stick with, wow, that's a gift.
Yeah, I would say, just to echo that, it's, that's that life, that holistic coach or mentor or friend or support system. And I agree that having someone that you can talk with about those holistic issues really kind of early in your career is important, because you can't really share a lot of things that are going on in your life with everyone internally. I mean, sometimes it's more information than your working peers need to hear about. But having someone who can help you struggle through those questions, do I go part-time? What happens? Should I have another kid? What's the balance between life and work, and how can I keep it? And people who are in a similar boat or have gone through that, or maybe older, probably are very willing to give you some help because they went through it. And that help is worth so much, especially if it's non-judgmental and a good sounding board with some great experience. I think that's just super important, and something to think about earlier than later, I think, as you start your career.
Thank you all so much for your responses to that question. The next question we have is, how often do you try and connect with those in your network? And then, Waguih, I know you spoke on this a little bit, but how do you try to maintain those connections as you grow and things evolve?
Well, I was lucky to get a job where it requires that I have to go outside and meet with people. So it's almost like the contact list is the first thing I look at, and I keep refreshing my network on a regular basis. But of course, once you start working and the job takes all of your time, and sometimes you will not look at who are in your contact list, who are the people in your network. And I would say force yourself. I heard it before. I don't know who said it, but I think Kathy mentioned be persistent in that. Make it a part of your work. Like, I know that most companies ask their people to allocate 10% of their time to do something different. Most big companies, at least they have that in their mantra, but I don't know if they really implement that. But make it a point that you go through, I worked for 7 years for this company. What will be my next level, and where am I going? Am I going to switch careers? And to switch careers, what is hot and what's not? You need to market yourself every 7 to 10 years. When I took the Stanford Executive MBA, the only advice that the director gave us at the end, we insisted on just one advice. He said, market yourself every 7 years. Find how sharp you are and if you are hireable. And we all said, what? We worked for companies that never fire. So we were wrong. He was right. And in order to be sharp and to market yourself, you need to refresh and review your network and add to it. So in answer to the question, Leila, all the time, you have to look at your network and clean it and add to it all the time. I'm sorry, it's part of life now.
No, that's good to know. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add on that front?
Well, it looks like Carter has a question.
Yeah, I just had a kind of a note for Waguih about like the refreshing the network. So obviously on one hand, like refreshing the network includes, keeping it kind of up to date with new people you meet and all. Do you, I was curious, do you also mean kind of like refreshing, almost like, say you were at a job 5 years, 7 years ago, like kind of reaching out to people from the past that maybe you haven't been in touch with and like trying to I guess, keep those relationships alive? And if so, like what are some, I guess, do you have any good tips or advice for kind of keeping old connections alive as well as kind of fostering new ones?
Yeah, pick up Memorial Day or 4th of July or Christmas or Easter or Rosh Hashanah, and you just send them a short note to your network and let them know I'm here. Invite them to come. Look at the powerful people in your network and try to invite them to your company too. I started a series of seminars where it went for 5 years. Every Thursday, we kept inviting people in the network, and that's refreshing the network because I found that half of them already left their positions and they are in other places. And people like to be asked questions. We have a problem in one of the companies I worked with. We couldn't terminate projects. Engineers are notorious about keeping the projects for life. I mean, you don't kill project. So I needed help. And I actually sent a note to the director of research at Google, and I asked him, and I got a book from him and a 1-hour call, and he and 3 other Google influential people are on my network now. So I think it varies with people, but yes, I always keep deleting the doubles, correcting the addresses and the companies, and it becomes a habit. When you feel the power, when you feel that it's helping you and your company, you will be doing it routinely.
I have a thought on Carter's question. Back in the day, there was no LinkedIn, right? That Waguih is right. You had to go get the business card and make sure it was up to date. And maybe they changed jobs and you wouldn't know because if you didn't have the business card, right? You might not even be able to reach them. Today, there are so many ways in which we can stay in touch. I would say they're necessary, but not sufficient. So LinkedIn is a great way as you collect those contacts of getting to those older contacts that you had. And I've had a lot of older contacts reach out to me saying, hey, when I was at HP, that was now almost 10 years ago. I'm saying, hey, you remember me from HP? And I'm actually connecting, and I did that today. And he now has an interview at VMware, right? And that was a 10-year ago connection. And you'd be surprised, refreshing it and making it part of your job, of your day, of how you do things. But you can use tools like that, but that's, like I say, necessary but sufficient. I think that's when it becomes transactional if you just do it that way. The physical reach out, the call, as we say, or the walking, as Waguih said, you walk to go see the people, that's what makes the difference. So either it be a voice-to-voice something, or hopefully the pandemic will be able to see each other in person at some point. But those sorts of things are what build the meaningful connections that make a network stick.
Thank you guys so much for answering all these questions, both from the panel and the Q&A. Now, in the interest of time, we're going to head into our wrap up of this event. So I'm just going to ask each of you panelists, first of all, thank you for such a meaningful conversation, but ask you each to give a quick closing statement. So starting with Waguih, just a minute or so of closing remarks.
I'll be shorter than a minute. Refresh your network. Be a connector. By being a connector, you give, not receive, because people will remember that for you. Believe me, later they will you will be surprised about the kind of things that you will come and say, remember, that's what you did for me. And be positive. If you are negative and always complaining and stand in a conference, one of the things that will help you as your network is to, when you go to conferences, try to connect with people around. If they see that you are negative and complaining a lot, it's so contagious and doesn't help. So my advice, refresh your network, be a connector, and always be positive. There is nothing to be negative about.
That's great advice. Yes, people always want to interact with people that have a good attitude. Next, Mariah.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to join this conversation. The last thing I'll say is that your network doesn't need to be the entire world for you to find success. I think that's a myth amongst students who are active on social media and especially LinkedIn, that they need to be LinkedIn famous to have a good network. There's a difference between a network and a following, I'll just say. And I would personally take a handful of really genuine, solid connections over a million surface level ones. So be intentional with who you want to invite into your network. And if you're interested in a long-term connection, then be intentional, consistent with your communications with that person. That's all I got. Thank you.
Mariah, that's definitely something you taught me, to like be intentional with your actions. It goes a long way to see a genuine connection. All right, next, Kathy.
Yes, Mariah took one of mine, quality over quantity, but I will also add that build your confidence. Don't be afraid to ask. Be persistent, right? Like we say, we're all humans. All you have to do is ask, and you'd be surprised how many people will say yes. And then when you get that yes, be intentional about the relationship. You drive it. What do you want? Ask them what they want out of it and build that connection that will last. But don't be afraid, just ask.
Thank you, Kathy. I love this theme of confidence and like chasing what you want that you've been carrying through. Really good advice. Lastly, Marcy, would you mind giving us your closing statement?
Sure. So my point to emphasize is to carve out time to make those relationships, make it part of your day, get good at it, and enjoy it, because those, I think it's been said, I think Waguih said this, that network is your net worth. So at the end of your career, you're going to look back and those relationships are going to be what make you feel good about what you've done. It's not the stuff you've done, it's the people you've impacted and who have impacted you. So invest in it as it is a value and a lasting value to you, and enjoy it as you go along.
That's really, really great advice. Thank you so much. Thank you, panelists, so much for your insights and spending the time tonight. Before we fully wrap up, we're just gonna throw one more poll question out there and give everyone about a minute to answer it. Again, it's gonna be, what's your engineering connection? So everyone gets like 30 seconds to vote. So in case you didn't see this the first time around, go ahead and fill this out. So hopefully everyone got a chance to fill that out at this point. Awesome. So yes, we can see the numbers skewed a little bit. We got a couple new faces in the room. So yeah, not much of a skew on where the results fall, but hopefully the advice you take away is what all of our panelists gave us throughout this event, and especially from their closing remarks of having confidence, reaching out to others, making sure that you're genuine in those connections, and staying vigilant in updating it. So as we close this event, I just want to thank all the panelists for making time today in their busy schedule, spending time to talk to us and give us their pearls of wisdom. Thank you to the Engineering Advisory Board for organizing this event. And thank you all for being here now to make the time to listen to our panelists. Please be on the lookout for the next Engineering Connections event, which will occur later in 2021. You can stay up to date by visiting the page at scu.edu Engineering Connections, which will be thrown in the chat. Thank you everyone again, and good night.